back to the Berg Podcast. Thanks for joining us today. With me today is Dan.
Hey, everybody.
And Ford.
Hey, how's it going?
And today we are talking about trade partners. And I think 2024 was a year for us where we really figured out what we were looking for in a trade partner relationship and established who was a good fit in many ways for us and in some ways who wasn't, right? We kind of went through some periods. We had some very challenging jobs. We talked about a lot here on the podcast. And at times we had to lean into our trade partners to ensure that we could continue to manage the tasks that our jobs required. And some of them really stepped up.
They did. And I think we'll just step back to like trade partner because it's been like a new vogue term for, I'd say, like the last 5 years. Before it was subcontractors. And, you know, a lot of people use the trade partner thing as this like warm and fuzzy feeling that like, oh yeah, we're with you. And, you know, whether it's the level above us or the level below you, you know, what does Warren Buffett say? Like, you go out in the water and when the water recedes, you see who's wearing a swimsuit and who's not type situation. And so that's where one of those things. You didn't hear that one?
I don't think so.
Yeah. When the tide goes out, you'll see who's
wearing a swimsuit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that a risk measurement? Like the folks who weren't wearing swimsuits were willing to tolerate the risk.
They were. Well, I think it's more like when it's going well, everything looks good, and then, like the only way you know is when the tide goes out. That's at least my.
I took it the way you took it.
Yeah, I was thinking like risk measurement. Like if you believe in the water level, you don't wear the suit. I don't know. I don't know. All right. I get what you're saying. I've never heard that though. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, you know, what is really a trade partner? And not like you're not partners, but you're working together to the completion of something.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's where it really matters for us because, you know, lip service is one thing. Anybody can say anything. It's when you actually rubber hits the road and then you can really determine who that is a great fit. I remember years ago, we were doing septic systems and there was a company called Predoc that we worked with that sold us the materials. Well, somebody else came in and was undercutting them. But I had a relationship with Predoc and I knew Predoc's service to the customer. So we'd install a system, but then Predoc had to actually maintenance it for the homeowner. And the other people weren't doing that. And so there was like 4 or 5 jobs where we lost because the other person was undercutting. But to me, it wasn't worth the risk of what we did. I'd rather lose that job than to use the cheaper price for somebody that I knew wasn't doing the same quality of service.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I think that like something you said there about like everybody who's even like adjacent to or touches your business in any kind of a product sales or service capacity says they want to do business with you, right? Like
everybody wants the money
at face value. Yeah, we'd love to have your business, right? And I think like all that really means is like we'd love to sell you our product. We'd love to like take your money. We'd love to take your money.
We'd love to make a profit on you.
Yeah,
not in a bad way. I'm not saying that in a bad because everybody in business is trying to make profit.
Yes, and they're entitled.
We would like to be able to add your money to our bottom line.
Yeah, but not everybody like actually wants to do business with you. They don't all want to, like you said, partner with you. And that partner term is challenging because it is a relationship like you described with Predoc. It is like you trust them to hold up their end of the bargain. And so you're willing at times to pay a premium or choose them over another service provider or material provider or whatever for that specific reason.
Well, I think that goes uphill for us too. Like that's what we always talk about, having multi-number jobs for clients, because at some point, probably one of those clients might have had a choice between us and another competitor to do the work. But maybe we did something on a previous job that they felt that we were a better fit. And maybe the money was exactly the same. Maybe we were $1 more. Who knows what the scenario is? We don't get to see that. But the reality is that, you know, that history, and if they keep coming back to working with you, that means that you're actually providing them what they expect out of it. You're not expecting someone to go above and beyond. That's always a benefit. But you're at least expecting them to do what they said they're going to do.
Well, nice. Ford is always, you know, it's one of the things that if you know Ford and his businesses, Ford is not a big fan of partnerships, right? Like in other words, that Ford loves engaging with people, and he has an immense amount of trust in the people that work with and for him. But ultimately, he would like to be responsible for the general well-being of everybody. And the best way for him to do that is to maintain a level of control that he can provide. He can make a decision that is best for the team, is all those things. So it's funny when we start to talk about a trade partner, because right in the word is a problem, right? Because a partnership is a really deep thought. It's a really deep relationship. Like if you take it, most of us would say, if you say what comes to mind when you say partner, I'm going to think my wife, right? So that relationship is a lot of trust. You know what I mean? It's trust with money. It's trust with kids. It's trust with your emotions. It's trust with your own immediate family before you got married, and the larger family. And so when you enter into business relationships and people want to say like, well, we'd like to be trade partners, or they have you sign a trade partner agreement, right? Like that's the first step when you have to do it, because it's the world we live in today. But yes, there is a marriage license, but the marriage license certifies that we got married. It is not a prenup,
right?
And a trade partner agreement is more like a prenup. It's more like, hey, here's going to be the terms, and if you know where to read them, you're going to see how it doesn't go well for you.
Yeah, it's not a mandate of sorts, right? Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not certifying that you're partners.
Sure.
It's certifying the rules of this partnership, and it's written by one person, one side. And so it's a really funny conversation, because I feel really fortunate when we find when we work with someone, and I feel like we're in a relationship where it's give and take. And we have found that with a number of vendors and a couple GCs. We have worked with good GCs, and we have worked with GCs that we struggled with that was likely our own fault. But it's few and far between when you find someone who really wants to be a partner, who wants to say like, hey, your price may not be the lowest, but we know the work you do, and we know the service you're going to provide, and we believe that's what's best for us and for our clients.
Yeah.
And that's the spot I really want to get to, not because I don't want to have to be low, but rather because I want them to realize the solutions we're trying to provide and bring and be involved in. And so it gets hard for me personally when I walk into a room and somebody, especially when it says partners everywhere, you know what I mean? There's all these signs about how we're all teammates. And then you sit in a meeting and we are clearly not teammates.
Sure.
Like we are clearly on opposite teams right now. And it's your team trying to get to a spot which isn't really advantageous for me. And that's what we had to start to identify, I think, was we had to start to look at interactions and say, okay, to Ford, or one of you said about they say it tongue in cheek, that are we really in this together where we're trying to support you and you're trying to support us? Or are we in a situation where you're going to do what's best for you regardless of whose expense?
Yeah.
Because people always make decisions based on what is most advantageous. But in a good relationship, you're making it based on, we talk about greater good, how much, but you're making it for the greater good of the job, right? And that's what determines it. So it may not be beneficial or detrimental to you, but it's most beneficial to the job, and you make that decision.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what we've really tried to zero in on and say, like, how do we find those clients, those jobs, those owners, so that they can understand we're all trying to work together.
Well, I think one of the things that you really hit the nail on the head there is it's got to be like proven behavior, right? Like most relationships with any sort of third party vendor, whether it's a service provider or material provider or whatever, usually starts on the premise of like them making some assertion. And the same thing for us with the GC. Like, we do most of the work we do is as a subcontractor to general contractors, and we're making some assertion to them that we are competent and capable of doing the work on time, at or under budget, whatever the case might be, right? And the same thing is true when like those vendors, like, hey, we'd love to be your material provider of choice. We'd love to be your, financial planner of choice, whatever it might be. And those things are all based on like assertions, like the words that they're trying to get you to believe. Let's say we provide the best customer service, or we provide the highest quality product, but none of it really matters until it's actually demonstrated, or it's actually something that you can sink your teeth into at times and have some substance. So,
well, I think two things. One is like, I think from what I know, we still use the word subcontractor because I think it's just a more clean, truthful explanation for the people that work with us.
Yes.
Than trade partners. That's just something that's been coming up. But I know that, so in the software world, we've run into this multiple times and fired a lot of softwares. They promise you a lot of things. They show you a product demo version of it that has bells, whistles, and helicopters on it. And then you get the product and it's maybe 70% factual.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And it's like, under promise and over deliver is the name of the game, not the other way around.
It's a lot of this stuff is like you see, the demo is the right word. Like they'll give you a demonstration, but they won't let you have a trial.
That's different. You got to sign. You got to pay a check for.
Yeah. I mean, they won't let you actually utilize the thing for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days to prove that it's the right solution, right? And so there is a lot of times where maybe we've found some folks without their trunks in the water, as you said earlier.
Well, I think for us, it's the same thing. Like, we had to give our word to our client. Right. Then somebody else has to give us their word that they're going to do what we, to help assist us get this project done.
Yeah.
And, when they back off of that, we're still on the hook. And so every year we get more and more selective on that because of that situation, that we're still the one,
sure.
If we're representing that that's part of our scope, we will get it done in some format.
Yeah.
And then either we have to take it, go back after them or whatever the scenario might be, but we'd rather just not have to do that. We just want people that can do what they said they're going to do, when they said they're going to do it, for how much they said they're going to do it. There's three simple factors to it. But there is a lot of fluidity in our market, and a lot of ability to oversell and underdeliver.
I think one of the hard parts about that relationship, trade partner or trusted partner or whatever you want to call them, is it, and it's certainly true for us as well. Like, you have to continually prove that you're a partner. It can't be a one-time instance. And I think a lot about like the insurance industry, right? We've fired some relationships that we never had to test. And then when we actually had to test them, we found out they weren't partners, right? Or they didn't necessarily believe in what we were doing, or they took a one-time circumstance and said, well, that must be the story of who you are from this moment moving forward, which they clearly, from historical perspective, knew was not the case, right? And I just think about that. Like we just did. I was looking at some the billing information, and one of our clients, we're a sub to a builder, a GC, and I think we were on like the 87th or 97th, something like that. It ended with a 7 job. And I was like, that's cool, because that relationship, actually, the duration of that relationship has only been really a couple of years. And we've done a fairly significant amount of work from our perspective for that client in the last couple of years. And I was thinking about this topic, actually. I was like, man, I know not all of those jobs have gone perfectly, right? But I think we've been true to our word in managing when things went wrong. And I think they've been, for the most part, true to their word in being accommodating, letting us help them create solutions, meeting us when we're struggling with an environment that might have been created by them or their client or whatever the case may be. And like those environments, that's I think like one of what you guys are both talking about. That sort of like becomes the picture of what partner, trade partner, whatever the term is, actually should look like.
Well, and you know what a great point with that is, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah.
And a great point with that is it has been rocky at times, like,
sure.
because that's how a relationship works. Like there has been times that it worked exactly the way it was supposed to. And there's been times that
it works perfect,
that something came up, and maybe it was a site issue. Maybe it was an engineering issue. Maybe it was an owner wanting a change issue. The actual homeowner Maybe it was the builder falling short with something going on their side, but we worked through it.
Right.
And we work together. And that's where that like trade partner idea comes from. And that relationship is a really good example of it, where every job doesn't go perfect. I mean, they're all done and it's been successful, but they don't go perfect. Some of them do, some of them don't, but they work together. You know what I mean? They want to be a partner, and we're not their only site work contractor.
No, right.
You know, they have other people doing their work as well. And they try and look at it, I think, and say like, okay, what's the best? We have 5 jobs and 3 people we're going to give them to. What's the best job for them and for us to give to these 3 companies? And how do I divvy this up? You know what I mean? And I think you have to give them credit that they're successful in doing that and looking and saying, this is going to be successful for this reason. Is it always perfect? No, but they're thinking it through, and they're electing to work with certain people, and they're not just price shopping and saying, I got it for $10 cheaper, right? Because that doesn't go great. I mean, we don't regularly do it. You know, the hardest part I think that we have as a contractor working with a vendor is actually some of the materials like stone, right? Like aggregate, because the location is so much of the game. You know what I mean? There are quarries we really like to work with, and there are quarries that we work with because of location, you know, and you feel the difference between those two things. You know what the difference is, you know, but there's not much you can do about it. You know what I mean? Like if you're half the distance closer, it's just, you're not going to be able to get close.
Yeah.
It's, you know.
Well, and I think that really ties back to like what you said about the relationship and the length of it. If you continue to do stuff for people and they trust you, and then something does go wrong, they're more willing to fix it because you have built up that goodwill. But if on job number 1, it goes south, there is nothing to lean back on. There is nothing to work with. And, you know, that's the tough part, because there might be a new sub out there for us that we don't even know about. But until you try them, you know what I mean? Like there's certain subs that we've been using for years and years and years. And so if something does go wrong, you know, they're probably going to get a little bit more leeway to correct that problem than somebody. And that's just the fact of life. There's no 2 ways around that, but that's just how it goes. You know, even in the snow business, you know, we've been doing the same job sites for 13 years now, I think, something like that, some of them. But we've learned now, if we go to a new job site, we have to set the expectations, because it takes us time to learn the property, learn the project. And, you know, you could take 100 tours, but until you're actually doing it and experiencing it in the inclement weather, doesn't matter. I mean, you could walk the place, you could bicycle the place, you could, you know, go on a unicycle. It doesn't really matter. You're not going to get the feel of it until it actually happens. And so those are the kind of things you learn over time, as to how to set that up appropriately so that both sides understand what they're getting if they're changing out their vendors.
Well, you know what? And I 100% agree with you, but I'm also going to call out that we have seen the other end of that. We have seen entering into relationships where out of need, we have to utilize somebody because they have a skill set, you know, that they can do something we need done. And they turn out to be really good partners, you know, or even with the GCs. There's a couple GCs that we like worked with, and we were, you know, might have been nervous about it. And we get in there and we're like, actually, these guys, they do what they say they're going to do. It isn't perfect, but they do what they say they're going to do. And we've, you know, they've made mistakes. We've made mistakes along the way, but you got to be able to build through that if you want to have that sort of relationship. And if not, we talk about -1 all the time. You can be on -1 all the time. And that's not good for anybody.
Right.
Because you just...
Because you're constantly in that situation.
You're constantly in that situation.
You're on -1. You're always in the starter phase of a relationship.
You're like always dating.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You're always speed dating.
Always dating somebody new.
Somebody new. Yeah.
Because always dating could be different.
Could be okay. Yeah, that's what I meant. I meant that you're always
first date, not the third
like,
date.
Yeah, it's like speed dating. You just keep jumping from table to table.
Right.
And you know, and then you're like, oh, you know, it's not ideal. You know, it's not ideal. And so I do not like the word trade partner, because I just feel like it's a little bit facetious, because at the end of the day, we are all trying to do what, in a perfect world, I would say even I have to acknowledge that I want to do what is best for the other people involved, so long as it is not injurious to Berg. Like I will make a decision which may not be the best thing for Berg, but is acceptable for Berg and is really good for a client. But you got to be careful, because you end up in relationship with people who are just going to do the best thing for them, regardless of how injurious it is to you. And those are the relationships that you got to catalog in your brain and say like, okay, I can't be in this situation again. And try and determine, was the situation, your fault, or was the situation the other people's fault? And what could have been done to avert it, and try and do like an analysis of it and look at it, and say like, okay, how do we avoid this again?
Yeah. I guess that is like the crucial part, right? The learning experience that comes from those relationships. Because not every relationship that hasn't worked out hasn't resulted in something good, right? So, I mean, there's a lot that can be learned from being vulnerable, right? Yeah. So, like, we trying the new GC, working with the new sub, whatever it might be. There's a lot that can be learned. Sometimes the lessons are painful, but.
Well, and if you don't try new, if Ford hadn't elected to try new things, we wouldn't be sitting here.
Sure.
It had to be Ford willing to take a chance and try and do certain things. And then each of the people that he brought in being willing to take that same initiative and say like, okay, let's go do this. Let's try to do, all these little things. And that's what adds up to where we are today, is that, we would always say like risk tolerance, that we are willing to take the chances. But I think as you sort of mature as a company, you need to start to look at it and be more like intentional, to use like a Brian word, to be more intentional about looking at it before you're ever in a situation and saying, okay, this is a really good idea, but is there anything that could be a problem? And if there is, what's the problem? And let's identify if that's worth the risk or not.
And I want to jump back just because I was thinking on that story you said about the Dash 97 or 77 or whatever it is. So this is how we got that client.
Yeah.
I was working for a contractor, and one of the laborers on the job site for the GC, got to know him, be friendly, have coffee with him on the jobs because we went to different jobs with him. He went to work for that company and they needed somebody, and he passed our name over.
Yeah.
So literally a laborer, like we always talk about, like,
just treating somebody right in the right, in the right environment.
Yeah. Saw us do our work. He was there seeing us do what we did, and like took us with him to somewhere else. And I don't even think he's still at that company, but at the right time they were in need of somebody and he had a name to pass along. And so that's always the funny thing. You think about, like, you're dealing with the project manager, but who's the assistant project manager, or who's the, everybody's there. Even
beyond the people, even beyond the roles, like what Brian just said. I mean, and I think that is at the core of, just treat people with dignity. Like, regardless of what their role is, you don't know what impact any single person can have on you down the line. Just do like the next right thing. Like, be who we say we want to be, right? Like, live the values that we put on the board and on the cards and on everything else. You know what I mean? Do those things. And I think by nature we will be a good trade partner, because that's who we want to be. That's the business we want. I don't want to win because I'm low. I don't want to win because I smoked somebody else by missing something. I want to win because you want us to do the work.
Right.
I want to do the work because you think we're a good partner. And that's sort of, and that's a great example of that, where, Ford talks to a laborer who then, moves to another job, and then everything else follows. And that's not uncommon. I think if you look at how we got a lot of our best relationships, it's not by going out and like cold calling people. It's by doing the right thing at a certain time, just because it's the right thing, and then other people taking notice of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've had a lot of good trade partners in 2024. I know this started as a little bit reflective. And I think that the only way we found a lot of those was by trusting people, by trusting and verifying at times, right? And I think that will probably be the story of 25 for us too, is, as we talked about, like, a few episodes ago, we talked about kind of like the transition back to who we are, or who we were, so to speak. And I think that'll be a key role, us being, continuing to prove that we're a valuable trade partner or a valuable subcontractor, but also continuing to find and establish and fortify good relationships with people. So,
yeah, I think it's, it is, if we can get back to being who we were, and we didn't get away from it.
Sure.
But, and I want to be really clear with that as the guys listen to me say it. we never got away from being who we were, but you have to work in the environment that you're in at that moment, and we got to a point where we had a scope of work, which was not our normal scope of work. And we had to work through that. But it has been fun. And we talked about this, I don't know how many weeks ago. It is fun to walk out now and see us doing the work that we want to do. I mean, I wish we could have gotten there in August or September when weather would have been clean and we could have had a lot of fun. But regardless, it's fun to go out and see the guys do their work. And even now, we talk about Dash 87 or 97, 77, whatever the number is. But another one is snow, and Ford had said snow. Like we don't have Dash a lot in snow, but we have worked for a very specific client.
Sure.
For I think it's been 14 or 15 years now. Ford's worked for him.
Yeah.
And that relationship is really another one of those really strong relationships. I mean, this year Tom called and he was like, "Hey, all these things changed," and I was like, I was probably too busy and not focused enough at that point where I needed to be with snow. And I was like, that's ridiculous. Like I was aggravated. I was like, this is just crazy. I called our contact and was like, said this was crazy news. He was like, I told you to go look at the site. They had changed some things. And I said, I don't remember that. And he was like, well, do you remember? And he said 3 other things. And I was like, all right, I remember that. And he was like, well, you probably just forgot because you didn't, you've been doing it so long, you weren't worried about it. But he then worked with me on it. He didn't say like, well, that's too bad for you. He said like, okay, well, I had already dealt with this or that, and then later on there was another item that got called. It was speed bumps. Oh. And so Tom called me and he said, they just added like 30 speed bumps, which is a problem when you add temporary speed bumps in winter. They're just going to get blown off.
Right.
And I literally called Lou and he picked up and he was like, I already know about the speed bumps. I heard they installed them. I'll deal with it. I was like, okay, thanks, Lou. Hung up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, and that's a really good relationship for us because he understands where we're coming from in terms of what potential issues are. But then I also have to be fair that when he calls me and says like, hey, I need you to get guys down there. I know we didn't have a plan. Like, I can't be like, well, my contract says that I have 24 hours if you don't notify me ahead. Like, I mean, I could take that stance, but
sure,
that's not being a partner. He's got a problem that he needs me to try and deal with. So, we try and react. So that's another one, it's been one of those, that's a longer relationship.
Yeah.
But similarly, it's another one where there's a lot of back and forth.
Right.
And it's in we always talk about snow is a stressful situation by nature. It's an emergency every time it happens.
Yeah. I was thinking about that when I was looking at some of the snow stuff as it was coming up. And you're right. It is like -1, -2, but it's because the site's been the same. Right. So it's a same client, long-term relationship. The years rolled over 10, 15 times, but it's still -1, -2. So I guess that's not always an indication. Although
you found the right one, you stay with them.
We don't have a lot of singular job sites that last.
It's not the nature of our work, right? Because we build things and then we move on.
Yeah, right, exactly.
But in that scenario, you think about it. I mean, it's been a long relationship.
Yeah, no, for sure. That's cool. That's probably a fair place to wrap it up. Folks, we hope that you got something from us, and we hope you come back for another episode. Thanks.